Snow still fell heavy on the mountainside as the wreck of Will Rogers lay twisted in the canyon. The crew had survived, but all were shaken. The engineer had broken his leg when he jumped from the cab. His fireman was cut and bruised, but able to walk. The conductor had been thrown from his bunk in the caboose and was limping badly. The brakeman had not been heard from since the crash. Through the howling blizzard, the conductor dragged himself 2 miles down the line to the new helper station. There, the men stationed inside sent a telegraph to Chadwick reporting the disaster on the pass. In the sheds, 2 Class B 28 Climaxes, numbers 9 and 10, sat cold and waiting. Their time would come later when it was time to clear the wreckage from the line. Back in Chadwick, news of the disaster spread throughout the town, and the railroad readied itself to combat the blizzard. Firefly, the veteran Baldwin 260, was fired up for duty. Alongside her stood the AM&W's newest locomotive, a Baldwin 1026E 280 Consolidation, freshly delivered and proudly named Chief. Strong, steady, and untested, Chief was about to face her first challenge. Together, Firefly and Chief coupled to the new MOW train, consisting of 2 flat cars and a caboose. And then it was time to hook up to the railroad's newest piece of equipment, a rotary snowplow. But the yard at Chadwick was too tight to spin up the blades, so the pair hauled the heavy plow through the storm to the sawmill, where there was room to fire it up. Soon the fire was lit, the boiler was brought up to pressure, and the great blades began to turn, roaring to life as snow flew high into the night. The order was given, clear the line and rescue the crew. Firefly and Chief leaned into the couplers, shoving the rotary through towering drifts. Snow exploded into the air as the blades chewed through the mountain's grip. The grade was steep, the air bitter cold, but the rescue train pressed on, hour after hour, its lights glowing like a beacon in the storm. By dawn, the rotary's blades broke through the last drift. Lanterns flickered ahead. The wreck of Will Rogers had been found. The rescue team dug through the snow and twisted steel to reach the crew. The brakeman was discovered beneath a tangle of debris, severely injured but alive. The rest of the crew, battered and cold, huddled together near the tender. With the men safe, attention turned to the locomotive herself. The rescuers worked through the day, digging out Will Rogers and her tender from the wreckage. Chains were fastened, and with care, Firefly and Chief pulled the battered mogul free from the canyon. Once she was clear of the mountain, the decision was made to leave the rotary behind at the helper station. The heavy plow had done its job, and now the priority was getting the survivors home. Firefly and Chief took the lead, backing down the line towards the smelter cutoff. Soon they had themselves turned around, ready to haul the damaged Will Rogers, her tender, and the rescued crew back down the mountain towards Chadwick. By nightfall, the lights of the rescue train appeared through the snow. The people of Chadwick gathered along the tracks as the battered engines rolled in, their whistles echoing faintly through the storm. The crew had made it home, cold, injured, but alive. The following morning, Chief backed the damaged Will Rogers into the new locomotive repair facility to receive repairs after her harrowing accident. The AM&W had survived the blizzard, but the wreck site still lay buried in the snow. With winter tightening its grip, the decision was made to wait until the thaw before clearing the remaining wreckage. The line to the iron mine was closed for the rest of the season, and Chadwick grew quiet once again. Spring arrived much to the relief of the railroad. As the last of the snow melted away, work began to clear the iron mine route of the iron ore cars that had become mangled heaps of metal after the accident. Climaxes 9 and 10 were fired up at the helper station and immediately put to work hauling the mangled cars away from the wreck site, and Short Stack was dispatched from the iron mine to help with the cleanup effort. After a few long weeks of grueling work, the wreckage was cleared, the iron ore cars repaired, and iron ore began flowing from the tipples again. And soon all 24 cars were full once again, and it was time for redemption. Chief and Firefly were dispatched from Chadwick and soon arrived at the iron mine. Chief was put on the head end with Firefly coupled behind her, and they began the task of taking all 24 cars down the canyon pass towards the smelter. The railroad held its breath, hoping another disaster wouldn't come to pass. There was a collective sigh of relief as the train rolled into the smelter. The AM&W had beaten the odds and came out on top after the disaster, and now iron ore began to be smelted into raw iron and rails destined for new destinations. Thank you for watching episode 5 of the Atchison, Missouri and Western Railroads Online series. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next run down the rails. This is Frisco Man 1522 signing off.